When you choose to earn your degree online from Southern New Hampshire University, you're saying yes to new opportunities and to new adventures. You're saying yes to something big, something you've always wanted to do. If earning your degree is one of your goals this new year, SNHU can help you get there. With low online tuition, no set class times, and multiple term starts per year, you can set the pace that works for you and save money along the way. Visit snhu.edu today to get started.
The knowledge, skills, insight, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Joshua Sheets. Today is Friday, November 22, 2024. And on this Friday, as we do on each and every Friday in which I can arrange the appropriate recording technology, we record a live Q&A show. You call in, talk about anything you like. It is an open line Friday show. If you would like to gain access to one of these Friday shows, you can do that by becoming a patron of the show. Go to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance, patreon.com/radical personal finance. We begin today with Samuel in Colorado. Welcome to the show. How can I serve you today, Samuel?
Hello. We've talked many times, and today I have new news. I got a house last time, but this time I just found out that I've been laid off from the job that I've been at for almost 10 years, public accounting.
Wow.
And we've discussed before. Yeah. We've discussed before. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay there, and I was even planning to leave earlier this year. So it's kind of a blessing. And I've listened back to your shows, your 3-part series, as well as the show way back on fearing your layoff. And that one, was really good because I didn't think I could ever be laid off, but I have about 3 months of severance. 2 months of that is WARN Act and 1 month of severance. And I did go ahead and apply for unemployment. I'm not sure if I'll end up getting it because, I pay into it anyway. But I was just curious, with that in mind, any other ideas? So a little bit of context with this house. I probably have about 12 months. I could pay the mortgage without tenants, and I'm trying to get tenants and house hacking. And then I'm doing a lot of repairs, probably going to be $30,000 right from the get-go. So it's really interesting timing. The day before I moved into the house, I found out I got laid off, and it was about 4 days after I had closed. So that was really ideal timing because 4 days earlier, that wouldn't have happened. But yeah, so that's kind of the backdrop. I have a little bit of margin. I would have felt very differently if I was still renting. Could have had years of margin if I was renting. But now that I bought this house, it changes the picture a little bit.
Sure. Well, let's just start by acknowledging the fact that you could always turn around and sell the house. So house purchases are not for sale. Obviously, you would lose money with closing costs and all that stuff, but you could always turn around and sell a house. So it's not like this one decision has to control everything, and it can be, it might be a great blessing for you. Do you have a specific question, or you just want to talk through kind of generally how to approach your situation?
I think generally how to approach the situation in light of, I just recently re-listened to your last shows. So, obviously, I don't think I'm in a situation where I need to call every contact in my contact book because I'm looking for something more targeted, accounting and finance, and hoping to get into accounting industry. So I'm mainly working with a few recruiters, but I'm not in a huge rush. I'm also looking for roommates very actively. I'm also working on a lot of projects and working with contractors. So just kind of how to balance all that but still get the right job in enough time.
Right. Okay. So for those who don't know, the episodes you're referring to, I think, are episode 193, 194, and 195. It's a 3-part series, and the first episode in the series says, okay, you're going to be laid off. I can't remember the 3 parts, but basically it's like, here's everything to do if you think you might be laid off, or if you were just laid off. And so let me quickly reprise a little bit of that advice for the audience, because it is important to make sure that we're all on the same page. The first thing that you want to do when you are laid off is certainly take stock of the situation. It may wind up being a great blessing, and I can see several ways in which you can exploit it as a really great opportunity for you personally, especially for people who are interested in the concepts of early retirement. I always recommend that whenever you get laid off or whenever you change jobs, that whenever possible, try to stick a little mini retirement in there. Try to put a little test drive in of how you would like to live if you were to be completely retired early. And this will help you to experience that. So if you want to take 4 months and be on the powder every single day for 4 months, I'm basically okay with that. Although we'll talk through some of the details here. And there will be a few bits of advice that you'll want to consider. The next thing that you really want to focus on is you really want to focus on taking massive action quickly, especially to get a new job and especially to stay close to people and to stay in physical contact with human beings. So generally speaking, one of the greatest difficulties of being laid off is that you go from being surrounded by other people to being alone. And it's not good for a man to be alone. And the longer you go without a job, the harder it is to keep your chin up, the harder it is to feel strong, to feel self-confident, the harder it is to get a job. And so you want to put most of your focus into getting another job. And if you can do that, you have a long runway and you can do that and put 4 months on the powder every day, that's fine. But we do want to think about making certain that you have a good story to share for that you don't basically become toxic to the marketplace in some way, and that you're doing what you need to do to stay relevant in the job market. So let's begin there. Tell me why you were laid off.
So they said they were laying off 4% of the workforce, mainly in the associate and the manager level, which I was a senior manager at the time. And they said it was just public accounting relies on turnover, and the turnover they plan for in their hiring, they haven't been experiencing. And so the economy is just still slow in some ways in that industry, with hard to get additional work, hard to raise our fees as much as we need to. So they were just in a situation where they weren't as profitable as they wanted to be. And I've seen these layoffs happen before, but yeah, I just never thought it would impact me.
Sure. Okay. So is the natural next step for you to get another public accounting job?
I think that would be the easiest, but I knew for a while, once I quit or if I left this job, I don't want to go back to public accounting, because you're still going to have the problem of work-life balance, a ton of hours. So I was ready to transition into industry or consulting or potentially government work. So I'm going to try to make that transition into industry away from public accounting, because I didn't honestly think I would be in public accounting as long as I was. So it's a perfect opportunity to try to get into something else.
Okay. Well, we won't go too deep into it, but I would affirm exactly what you're saying, is that if you were already thinking about making a change and then your hand got forced by a layoff, then now you don't have to do the hard work of making your own decision. It hurts a little bit. It hurts no matter how generally happy you are about it. It hurts to get laid off. But at the end of the day, in the fullness of time, you'll look back and probably be grateful that it happened now, rather than you sticking it out at a job you really didn't like for 2 more years and then going to go and do something else. So what I would say is focus hard on that new job search. Put in place everything you can to be working towards that new job, whatever it is, and go as fast and as hard on it as you possibly can. Do you need or would you benefit from any additional education, credentialization, or certification?
I don't believe so. I have a CPA. That's the main thing that gets looked at in the
Okay.
industry. I don't have a master's degree, but once you have a CPA, they're not generally that concerned about it as long as you have a bachelor's.
And are any of these jobs that you're considering jobs that you think you might be happy to do if you were fully financially independent?
More so than public accounting. But I think if I was truly financially independent, I would want to live off of my permanent house hack and just start doing more of the maintenance myself.
Okay.
But yeah, potentially.
All right. So let's turn to that. The great thing about working on a house is that you can give it now your full attention. So you've probably got maybe 80 to 90 hours a week that you can put into this house. And although you're not particularly handy yet, if you're willing to learn how to do it, then you should be able to make all the relevant upgrades to the house and improve its condition very, very quickly. And this may turn out to be a very efficient move for you financially. Remember that, generally speaking, any increase in value that you can force into your home is probably going to wind up being tax-free on the other side. So if you put in 3 or 4 months into getting this house to the dream level, and maybe you can force $50,000 of appreciation or $100,000 of appreciation, depending on what adjustments you do to the house, then in the fullness of time, that'll wind up being $50,000 or $100,000 that's totally tax-free. No income taxes, no employment taxes, just totally income tax-free. And that can probably line up very well with a job search. Generally speaking, if you are a credentialed professional, you have the ability to speak to recruiters, you have the ability to come in at the middle ranks or higher of a job or a business, then it's mainly a matter of starting the balls rolling. And you don't necessarily have to beat the streets for 10 hours a day. You're not just trying to come up with the first thing that pays you money. So a couple hours a day dedicated to making certain that you're speaking to every recruiter that's out there, making certain that you're targeting companies and positions that you're looking for, getting the applications in and getting the process started would then free you up to work on the house. So I would encourage you, go hardcore on fixing up the house. And if you have more time, you can usually reduce the amount of money that you would have to spend out of pocket using recycled materials, being more flexible with help, having people be able to come and work for you, contractors who are doing the work in their side work time at nights and on weekends rather than during the day, all the different things that you can do to save money. And there's a world of information out there to guide you, a world of craftsmen who can guide you and coach you all along the way online. So I would encourage you that this may work out really well. And then as quickly as you can get your house rented out, then you'll be in good shape. Now, if you didn't live in the house and the house were fully rented, would that be sufficient to pay your expenses if the house were fully rented and you weren't living in it?
I don't think including all the repairs, but
I just mean your monthly
mortgage,
costs.
probably not a guarantee it will cover the property tax, but definitely the mortgage and interest.
Okay. Well, trot down to the library, get yourself big stacks of books on home repairs, on, manuals, on all the different work that you need to do. Make certain that you pick up a couple of books on landlording and work through there. Get on YouTube and start looking for ideas on how to save money. Make a complete list of everything you need to do to the house. Start getting tenants in there as quickly as possible. My point of what I'm driving at is that if you can get this house rentable quickly, then you can cover your expenses and you're still just as free after the layoff as you were before. And maybe it takes you a year or two. If you can raise rents a little bit after a year or two, then you'll be comfortable there. So don't go after the job that you just feel like I have to replace my other job. Go after the job that's the most likely to lead to you being content for the long term, and really work hard to get that kind of job. Because if we imagine a dream life for you, say a year from now, a dream life for you a year from now would be to have your house with 3 or 4 roommates in it, covering a good portion of the expenses. You have overall low personal living expenses. And so it'd be amazing to find a job working at a company that you enjoy, that gives you the kinds of flexibility that you need to go rock climbing, to go skiing, to pursue the kind of lifestyle that you want, and gets you around the kinds of people that you want to be around. And so let's work hard towards that with huge effort, and then see what happens over the coming months. So that's just a general guiding principle. That good enough for today?
Yeah, thanks so much.
My pleasure. We go on now to the great state of Texas. Welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Thank you, Josh. I heard you mention a few weeks ago that you were looking at the FAFSA and how it worked. And my kids are a couple of years older than yours, and we have a relatively high income and an emergency fund that's proportional to that high income. Anything that you saw that really pointed you in thinking about how to manage your income? We're in a two income house. You do some flexibility with how we receive bonuses, but not much else other than that. Just interested in your thoughts or any creative ideas you had come up with.
Absolutely. There are 2 basic things that you may be able, two big winning ideas when it comes to the FAFSA. So I do need to be responsible and just kind of lay the table and simply say that the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, will probably result in your having help and support, but trying to optimize the FAFSA, I don't think it should be generally a primary plan. Your goal is to be rich. Your goal is to be rich enough to pay for whatever you want to pay for. And so if you can just simply pull out your checkbook and write checks for college because you're rich, you have a high income, you have high savings, and you can just pay for that, that's great. And the fact that there may be federal money available for you, okay, that's useful, but that shouldn't be the driving factor. If your student wants to go to school at an inexpensive school, that's always an option. You don't always have to choose an expensive school. There are lots of inexpensive schools in the United States. There may be more in the future. President-elect Trump is promoting an American university as part of his plan, which would basically be a government university that would provide lots of college classes for free, which, by the way, I don't like to say I told you so, but I probably should say I told you so when relevant, when meaningful. I have said for many, many years that college tuition is cheap and getting cheaper. And I believe that if President-elect Trump follows through with what he says he's going to do with some form of American university, then this is a pretty decent example of that trend. And basically, just for new listeners, the reason I do believe and have believed for many years that in the fullness of time, colleges, at least government colleges, will be free, is that ideologically, Americans believe that school of K through 12 should be free. So if you believe that school from K through 12 should be free because it's a public good, then why shouldn't years 13 to 16 also be free? Why shouldn't trade school for 13 and 14 and 15 also be free? It doesn't make any sense to say to everyone that K through 12 should be free, but 13 through 16 should not be free. So much of the world has already come to that logical solution. Many nations in Europe, many nations in South America, some in Asia, although I am not as familiar with Asian government schools as I am with South America and with Europe. But many schools in these places are already tuition free. Universities are already tuition free. And so for that to happen in the United States is already an expectation. And I think that we'll see more and more of that. In some states in the United States, there are already many 2-year community college programs that are tuition free. And in some states, there are some 4-year programs that are already tuition free in the United States. So my point with that little sidebar is to say that if you don't want to spend a lot of money because you can't get a lot of financial aid, just make a thoughtful decision on college. And if you want your child to go to an inexpensive school, then have them go to an inexpensive school. If you want to enroll your child into university in Luxembourg because it's tuition free, then do it. You know, there are dozens and dozens of options other than trying to massage the FAFSA as your primary strategy and solution. The second thing is you want to lean really heavily in all of your discussion and all of your work on the usefulness of aid, of financial aid, of merit-based aid. And so merit-based aid is not going to be issued to your student based upon with income and asset rules. You can earn a lot of money and have lots of money, and your student can still receive lots of merit-based aid. So optimizing the FAFSA may be one strategy. Making certain that your child applies for 300 scholarships will be another strategy. And I firmly believe that everyone should do option 2. And the reason ultimately is for the student's good and for the student to be able to get a lot of benefit out of college. When I was in college, the great mistake that I made was I went to an expensive school with modest financial aid, and I worked my way through. So I was working all the time to try to pay my tuition. At one point in my freshman year, before I started borrowing money on student loans, I had 3 jobs simultaneously. Well, I thought I was being smart at the time because look at me, I'm paying for college and I'm not taking out student loans. But in hindsight, I basically wasted 90% of what I could have done in college if I had had time available to me and I had given myself time and somebody had come along and coached me on how to effectively invest that time. So it's really important that you get the time factor right. And the best pathway that a student has is through scholarships or possibly through mom and dad simply stroking a check. All right. Now with that foundation, let's come back to the FAFSA. FAFSA is based upon your income and your assets. So if you have a high income and you have a lot of assets, then the government will look at those numbers and say, well, we see here that you don't need very much financial aid. So therefore, we're going to recommend that your expected family contribution number be quite high, and we're going to not give you a lot of financial aid from the government and the school. We're going to recommend that you don't need very much financial aid as well. So the key is to look at those numbers and ask yourself what counts as income and what counts as assets. Now, in your case, you may be able to wiggle your income a little, but most people can't wiggle it all that much. If you could wiggle your income a huge amount and you could swap out earned income in favor of unearned capital growth, that might be something that really works well for you. So I've coached people like this. They have high wages. They're coming up with a child that's headed for college and maybe two more behind. I've recommended, hey, if this is the year that you really want to start a business and you already knew you were planning to start a business, good chance that your earnings are going to be pretty low in the first couple of years. There's a good chance that any money that you have in profit will be reinvested back into the business. And if you make money, then it's probably going to be capital growth that will be untaxed because it's currently unrecognized. And yet this may work out really well in the long term. Or think of the previous caller. Somebody wants to build a house and you're thinking about taking a couple years off and building the house yourself. Well, if you can stop your earned income, stop your business, stop your job, and start working on your house for a couple of years, well, now you can turn in a couple of FAFSAs with very low income, which will ultimately help your long-term award amount. Now, that probably isn't going to do much for you, although it may. And the key thing you want to look for is retirement contributions. So if you can increase your retirement contributions, that is a key factor. Possibly if you can do, I'm about to say this, and am I going to get it wrong? Let me not say it. Let me just say retirement contributions, not go into the details of what those would take. So then the second thing, let's look at assets. So you want to look at the FAFSA and you want to see what assets am I required to report and what assets am I not required to report. So cash in bank accounts and non-deferred, non-qualified assets are all reported as available assets. So you want to dramatically minimize the cash that you have available to you, and you want to put it all into assets that are not reported. What are the assets that are not reported on the FAFSA? Well, the huge one is your retirement accounts. So why do I jump up and down and beat my fists on my chest trying to desperately to get people to fund their retirement accounts? Because you're a lot better off maxing out a retirement account from the age of 20 to the age of 50 when your children go to school, because you may have millions and millions of dollars in the retirement account and none of that is reported as assets on your FAFSA. So you want to make certain that you're absolutely maxing every retirement account contribution that you can and getting as much money in there as possible. The second thing is usually home equity. And so if you have a big balance on the mortgage, then you may want to stroke some checks and reduce the balance much lower in order to take some of that cash that would be reported on the FAFSA and reduce the equity. Those are the two big ones. There are some other smaller ones that you can look at, but those are the two big ones. What I would finish, though, by saying is that, does this matter? Yes, this matters. Is it a good thing to do? Yes, it's a good thing to do. Does it matter all that much? My answer is, for most people, probably not all that much. So do it. Great, but don't stress out about it. And if you're in just a normal situation where everything's working, be grateful the fact that you can stroke some checks. Be grateful that you have a child who's going to college. Be grateful that you can just pay for it, and don't twist yourself out of shape to try to report a government form in some way.
Thank you very much. We're on the same page. And my one last follow-up question is there kind of a threshold where you hit that number and then after that your expected aid is zero?
There probably is. I'm not aware specifically of what the exact number is, so I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. That would be a good question for a college consultant, or to go and use some of the online calculators that are available, or start with ChatGPT. I would pull up ChatGPT and I would say, I'm trying to run a FAFSA form and let's go over it, and I want you to coach me on it, and start playing with the different numbers for your expected family contribution. Remember, all the FAFSA is going to give is the expected family contribution. And then each institution is going to take that and the institution is going to then apply it based upon their internal numbers. So you'll still get different aid offers and different numbers from the different universities. And this all has to do with how much the university wants your student. So the key to focus on is to make certain that you're making good decisions for which universities want your student and where your student winds up going to a school that really wants him. And that's where you're going to get the best financial aid package.
All great advice. Thank you so much, Josh.
My pleasure. Good for you for thinking about the stuff and working on it. We go to Timothy in Virginia. Timothy, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today? Timothy, you're up.
Hi, Joshua. Thanks for taking my call. Yep.
My pleasure.
Let's see. So I didn't expect to get on the line so soon. I guess my question I had today, I didn't see it in your podcast about the course. Is your career and income planning material getting integrated into that RPF Academy?
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of justify this large purchase.
Well,
and that would go along.
Let me help you. Yes. So I actually had meant to do an ad right before my callers, but I've done so few ads, it slipped my mind. So let me do a quick ad on it as well. rpfacademy.com is the new course that I am creating. Now, RPF Academy is not just a simple digital course. What it is a comprehensive financial planning academy where I am going to teach you in a comprehensive format over an entire year of weekly classes. I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know to make a comprehensive financial freedom plan for yourself and your family. That will include all of the technical financial planning aspects, as well as what I call the effective financial planning aspects. So all of the stuff that I talk about here on the podcast into that course curriculum. My vision, and in addition, it has a high price tag because it also comes with 2 personal 1-hour consultations with me. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the best results possible by bringing together the personalized engagement with me, as well as the comprehensive catalog and database of ideas that you need to create. My vision for the course is that this becomes the resource that you go to each and every year and that you listen to constantly. So instead of just listening every week to free podcasts from me, I'm still doing free podcasts, but instead of just listening to free podcasts that are haphazard, I want you to go through and consume this course many times over. Now, the way that I've structured it means that some modules you won't need to consume, because right at the beginning of every module, I will give you the overview. And if you'll just listen to the overview and say, "Oh, yep, actually, it's been a year since I went through that, but no updates are needed, so I'm good. I don't need to go through that again," then you'll be in good shape and you can skip that. But there will be constant evergreen modules that you will want to go through. And so an example of that is career and income planning. And so I've had a variety of courses, about a half dozen that I have taught over the last years. And what I am doing is bringing all of those courses into the academy. And so the career and income planning course, people have asked me for years to update it. For years, it's been off the market. And so, yes, I am updating it and I'm bringing it in, and I'm bringing it into the context of basically an annual cycle. So we'll have the modules on here's what you do, big picture, how to make a plan, but then we'll have the monthly reminders of here's what you're doing right now, and let's revisit your career and income plan. Let's look and see what is your focus for Q2 in terms of your career and income plan. And so that's what I'm bringing it in. So the answer is yes, I am updating everything. I'm streamlining a lot of it, because what happened over the years with all the courses is that, and it's a valid example as far as income planning. Income planning and income generation is 80% of what is necessary to become wealthy. The rest of it is 20%. And so what I have found is with all of my courses, basically, I always have these modules on career and income planning. And so I have a career and income course, but then I can't do a retirement course without laboring on career and income planning. And so now it'll all be in one place. And that allows me to streamline the modules, but also to expand them over the course of a year. The only course of mine that I don't expect to be in the academy is going to be the course of my international escape plan course. I may bring that in the future, but I feel like that's a pretty good one that is just sits by itself, which is available at internationalescapeplan.com. So long-winded, yes, and I would love for you to join. I think it is going to be the best value for money, best returning investment thing that's available to you or any of my listeners.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else?
Let's see. But you really answered it when you said that you were setting up the format of the course to periodically revisit. Part of the reason I was on the fence is because I'm in the military now and leaving in about a year and a half. So my career and income planning is it's a lot of planning, not much.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, I thought a lot about should I build some kind of membership that people would come into and go out of, right? Because that would be ordinarily the kind of the appropriate structure. It would be to create a membership site, and I charge an access fee, and then I continue to do this on an ongoing basis. And that's fine. I think I could probably deliver pretty good value from that, but I chose not to do that. I'm choosing not to do it for two reasons. Number one is, for me, I can commit to putting everything into basically 1 year, a 1 year masterclass of information. I don't know that 4 years from now I still want to be doing this. I've talked about most of the stuff that I want to talk about with regard to personal finance. I've still got some in me, but it's not, I don't have nearly the interest in personal finance that I once did. And yet I don't want to abandon the field without actually genuinely coming up with delivering what people need to do it. So I've got a year in me. I don't have 5 years worth of content on personal finance to try to hook you into a membership site. The other thing is that I don't think that the value is there for most people for kind of just an ongoing membership site. So I'm selling the RPF Academy for, if somebody wants to pay monthly, it's $200 a month for 1 year. That's $2,400. It's $2,000 if you just pay for it up front. I'm really confident in that number because I feel really good that I can increase somebody's net worth by 20 grand pretty easily with what I have to go over in the course. But it's not that you're just a one-time thing. My vision is basically to deliver to you something that, as I said, you'll be able to go through, you'll be able to remind yourself. And so there will be this will be in a comprehensive format. I don't have ready up front all of the things that perhaps I will be able to finish in the fullness of time, things like the journals and the workbooks and all of that. I will have the notes, and so the notes are available and you can print them out and make your own journal. But the point is that it's my vision is to create a manual for you, a simple manual that has everything that you need to do about money. And then what I'm doing with that is pairing it with ChatGPT and prompts. So that was the key factor for me, is that when you get to the details of it, I've got listeners from the United States, from Canada, from Germany, from the UK, from South America, from all across Europe. How do I possibly bring all that stuff into a book? I couldn't do it. But with ChatGPT, I can do that because every lesson has the specifics every lesson can have the general structure, the non-negotiables that are universally applicable. Then I can have a US module on the end so that if we're going to talk about 401ks, we can deal with that there, and IRAs. And then for Canadians and RRSPs and the things that are different for every country, I can just refer that to ChatGPT and you can use it. So that's what I'm doing. And so it'll be a 1 year as I record all of the lessons, but my goal is that you will want to go through it, I don't know, maybe not every year, but at least every other year or so.
Great. That answers my question.
Wonderful.
I appreciate taking the time.
I hope to see you in there. rpfacademy.com, rpfacademy.com. We go to Ben in Georgia. Ben, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hey, Joshua. I have a question about a voluntary separation option at my employer, and I'm not looking for your direct advice, but more just like things I could be considering. So I guess the long and short of it is they're offering 6 months of severance, and that's pretty much it. And then of course they're offering a lump sum to pay for benefits up to COBRA. The reason that I'm thinking about it, I'm overall actually pretty happy with my employer. Like, they treated me well. The reason I'm sort of considering it is for the last year or so, I've been thinking about maybe shooting back into like some sort of part-time work. We have 3 kids coming up to school age. We're going to homeschool them. And my wife and I would sort of like to tag team the homeschool situation. So we're just looking for a little more time, and we live well below our means already. So they're two sort of separate things, right? Because I can't necessarily collect the severance and leverage some sort of part-time opportunity with my current employer. I'm considering sort of three options. One is obviously do nothing. Don't take the option. Two would be sort of tell my employer, hey, I'd like to work part-time for you guys. If that's not an option, then I'm gonna take the severance option. And then option three would be just take the option and go work somewhere else full-time for a little bit. We have a short-term savings goal for an addition on our house. That would, the 6-month severance would allow me to accomplish if I was able to, land another full-time role within a month or two. So those are sort of my three options, the way I see it. I don't know if you maybe think of any others, or if there's anything else I should maybe consider.
6 months severance is pretty healthy.
Yeah, it is. It's about 8 months worth of living expenses for us. I should say too, my wife works part-time already. Yeah.
Why are they offering to buy you out?
Yeah, they're offering it to every employee. They are anticipating, and they said this publicly to the employees. They're anticipating involuntary layoffs in January. I don't know. Personally, I don't feel like I'm at risk for that. But they're trying to get ahead of it. If there's people that want to opt out, they like to try to minimize the involuntary impact.
And you said there's another alternate job or a full-time job that you think you could get pretty straightforwardly?
I have nothing in the hopper. So they only recently announced this earlier this week. We have to decide by the 4th of December if we're in. So, I don't think I can reasonably line something else up by then. But I feel like my skill set and experience is good enough and in a way sort of general enough that I feel like there's lots of similar roles to what I'm doing today at lots of other companies. I don't think it would be a huge issue to find something else, but famous last words, I guess.
How old are your children?
5, 3, and almost 1.
Well, and so separate from this one, if you did take the option, when could you feel pretty confident that you'd be employed again if you take the buyout?
So I think my understanding is that the last day of employment would be January 31st. So then I would have 6 months of runway from there. I think that I feel pretty confident I could be employed again in a full-time capacity by I would say 2 months, right? So April 1st.
All right. Well, financially, go ahead.
I would just say, there's no way to really predict this. It's an application, right? So I could apply for this option, and they could say, no, your position itself is too important, or you yourself are too important. We are not going to accept your application. So sort of a weird situation, but it's possible that I could put in for it and be rejected, but obviously not really any way you can plan for that.
Right. Well, what would be the ideal scenario, right? I would say the ideal scenario would be you take the buyout, you put 6 months of cash in the bank, you take the next month or two, take some time off around the holidays and work on your house projects and help your wife with homeschooling so she gets kind of a great winter break, things like that. Then you go ahead and get another job, and in February you're employed again, and then this time next year they call you up and they hire you back into the current job at a full-time rate. Then you negotiate with them for part-time because you're so important, and that would be the ideal dream scenario, because the idea is the severance would be extra money. So is that doable? I would say it's probably doable. Like, you sound pretty confident. You sound like you've got good skills and things that may be helpful for useful in the marketplace. So it's certainly a possibility that could happen for you. So I would be very tempted to take it. Also, I would, just because 6 months of free money, if you're not going to get that very frequently in life. And so even if it's 6 months of 6 months of hanging out, 6 months of traveling the country, 6 months of working on your house, 6 months of some sideline business, to be offered a 6-month buyout is pretty unusual during the natural course of most employed men's lives, and that you can do a lot with that. And it can also be, if you have a savings goal that you're working towards, having 6 months come from this job and then getting another job in January where you can bank a whole year's worth of wages, that can put you quickly towards some of those other goals. Also, the fact that you're not stressed about money seems like this would be the kind of thing that you could take, because if you were already thinking about kind of taking time off or going part-time or something like that, then to be able to get some kind of offer like that with the 6-month severance, that's a healthy benefit. And as we said, maybe they do wind up laying people off as they are anticipating, but then maybe the market changes or the industry changes, and maybe they might be hiring again at the end of next year, and you may be back in. So I like the idea of your taking it, especially since you've already considered taking part-time work, you've already considered other things, and you feel confident about your ability to get another job. Should you offer them the part-time work and, instead of the severance? I think you shouldn't formally offer that, but you should ask a friend of yours kind of very quietly if there's any chance of that. My guess is that there's probably not a chance of that. And if there were a chance of that, then they would be doing that. They would be saying, "Hey, do any of you guys want to go part-time to reduce our overall overhead?" But if you offer that to them, I don't know. Maybe I'm not as confident in this as I was, but just doesn't seem like a smart move to offer it. It seems better like you should just take the severance offer that they are making to you, because even if they did hire you part-time, what would result in your finances? Well, all that would do to you is all that would do is mean that your income goes down, but you just don't have to go look for another job. That's what I was trying to drive at, is that if you take the 6-month severance and then you go get another job, even another part-time job, you're going to wind out financially far ahead than if you take the part-time job. Taking the part-time job just reduces your income and gives you a little bit more time off. Well, take the 6-month severance and then come back and talk to them in June and see if they want to give you a part-time job then. They may really need you at that point in time, or get something else. So I like the idea of taking it. I like the idea of having the extra income. And then the final thing I would say is that at 5, 3, and 1 with homeschooling, you're not doing much homeschooling at that young age. So I think where you're going to want more time for homeschooling is, say, 3rd grade to 8th grade. That's where I think you're going to wish for more time. In 1st grade and 2nd grade, even intense homeschooling is generally no more than a couple hours a day. So if your wife does an hour during the day and you do an hour in the evening when you're available, you can do everything that needs to be done in an intense way with a 1st grader or a 2nd grader, even a 3rd grader. It's only when you start to get things down the road where, okay, now the time may be more useful. And so I'd rather you be getting your family richer over the next, say, 3 years, and then go to part-time for those years, and then go back up, at a later date. I just don't see, unless your wife's overburdened and she really needs help and something like that, I don't see the point from a homeschooling perspective with a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Yeah, no, thanks for your perspective. I think, the part-time deal, this would be, sort of taking that on maybe earlier than we were originally planning, to your point. We don't really necessarily need it right now, but we think, it might be a good option in the future. It was just sort of one of those things where it had been on the brain, and then this other, clear shakeup is coming. Like, is there any way to sort of pair this together? But you're right. Like, we can just, I'm sort of leaning towards take it for full-time employment somewhere else, accomplish the full-time savings goal, and then maybe something opens up part-time at my current employer later. But I think it could work out. But maybe just take the money and run for now. But anyway, I just wanted to get your perspective, and if there's anything else I could be thinking about. But I appreciate your feedback.
My pleasure. I'm going to mute you out here, and I just want to give you one more thought to consider in the coming, just in terms of time. Whenever you're looking to free up time, be specific as far as what you want to do with the time. Don't be just general and say, okay, well, I need more time. So I'll use the homeschooling example just as an example. I am very involved with my children's homeschooling. I do basically all of the schooling for my 11-year-old and my 9-year-old. My wife, she's there, but she doesn't. I'm trying to think. I ask her here and there to do 15 minutes of helping a child with a page or something like that just during the day. But the total amount of schooling time that requires from me is under an hour a day, and I could do it faster, but I'm pretty hardcore. It's under an hour a day, and the reason for that is that my personal philosophy of homeschooling is that I think that the way that we teach children, the actual way that we go about it, should model the long-term goals that we have. So one of the reasons I homeschool is that I want to avoid the setting of a classroom environment. Why? Well, because it's my observation that when people learn primarily in a classroom environment, they might get confused into thinking that learning is something that happens in a class instead of learning being something that you do for yourself. And so one of the core tenets that I want to share and use to structure my own, our home education environment is that we do self-education. I want my children to educate themselves. That's the power, is that they need to be autodidacts. They need to educate themselves. Now, I'm not going to just leave them completely on their own. I'm going to guide them in that process. But I want the actual process of education to be something that you do for yourself, that you don't think that I am the one to do it for you. So I don't teach my children anything. I don't sit down. I don't lecture. I don't teach them anything. I organize their activities and I put in front of them world-class learning materials that they can then use to learn from. And they can then go and engage with. That's my vision. Now, will that change at some point? If I enroll my children in school, I'll give that up because I'll get other benefits from the school. But if we're going to do education and learning at home, I want their day to look like that. So my hour a day, what does it consist of? Well, in the morning, I prepare their daily checklists. So here's a checklist of your assignments for the day. They're laid out very carefully, very thoughtfully. I apply every bit of learning science that I know, and I search in my hobby in my spare time. My hobby is finding the world's best pedagogical materials and various curriculum that I choose for the things that I want them to learn. But then the actual expression of that is all themselves. And so when my students go through their workday, they're doing all of their work independently. None of it is with me at all. It's all independent. And I do that because I want that to be the lesson that's taken. Now, that's different than first grade. You can't start doing that kind of environment until a student can read and basically be independently reading. And reading should be the primary way that we learn and absorb information. But so you can't do that in first grade. You got to do more read aloud. You got to help and do more of that. So I spend about 45 minutes in the morning making 2 checklists, reviewing the assignments from the next day, from the previous day, making certain that nothing's getting sloppy and that we're making progress. And then that's it for the day. And then I come in at lunch and I come in at dinner and I take narrations at lunch and at dinner and I do a little bit of extra help. So with my 9-year-old, if this student is struggling with some hard readings or something like that, then I'll sit and do some read alouds at night. So to ease off the load a little bit, things like that. But even that's not strictly necessary. I use audiobooks and things like that as well. So my point of that is to say, if you think you need time, think about what you actually need the time for. What are you actually trying to accomplish? And what is that actually needed for? And I love to be with my children, but I think sometimes we kind of have this fuzzy idea that I need to be with my children and therefore I need to just stop working. And that doesn't sit well with me. That doesn't sit well with me as an appropriate goal. It doesn't sit well with me as the way that a man should approach his life. If you have enough money and you discover that your job is not generating enough, if you discover that your job and the income that your job generates for you is no longer the best use of your time, then you should reduce your hours at your job and focus on something that's more productive. But I don't think that means you should now go home and sit at home and teach your child for 8 hours a day and cause your child to be dependent on you instead of experiencing the magic of self-education. So you may take that time and say, my work at my job is no longer my highest priority, but now I'm going to focus on this other thing. I'm going to start this community organization that needs to be done. I'm going to start a school in my neighborhood because that's what needs to be done. I'm going to run for office because somebody's got to do it. I'm going to start preaching at my local church, and whatever the thing is, you should control your time, but don't just think that if I just sit at home and focus on my children, and that's somehow the highest and the best thing to do. I think you would wind up handicapping them in a significant way if you did that. So you should always look at your job critically and say, is this what I should be doing with my time? But don't automatically assume that you just need more time for your other pursuits. And my last caller just dropped off. I guess, Ben, I'll unmute you again there. And Ben, any thoughts on the last thing I said there?
No, I appreciate the perspective. I think, obviously with our 5-year-old, we're just sort of getting into the homeschool situation, right? So we don't necessarily know. Obviously at the beginning, maybe it's a little bit, depending on the way you look at it, maybe a little more hands-on. But I think generally we find ourselves, between my wife and I, like that there's sort of the way you're saying it, right? We're maybe we don't necessarily need every single dollar that we're generating, and it just feels like there's a better way that we could be using our time for, whether it be things at church or being more involved with our kids or whatever it is. But it's probably better to get a clearer idea of exactly what that is. We know that school at home is one of them, right? But that, to your point, it's not going to tie up all of our time necessarily, or shouldn't. So anyway, that's what the way we're thinking. It feels like there's a bit of an imbalance right now. We just got to figure out maybe what the other side of that balance is.
Yeah. And I think the key thing is, if your wife has a part-time job, then you're going to need to help with the children, right? I've had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and it's an intense time of life. It's probably the hardest time of life, actually, because basically all the children are useless, right? They're not independent. They're all on you. And so it's just constant. But 2 years from now, it's going to be totally different. And your children will start to be useful, and you'll be able to structure everything, and you'll be in a different place. If your wife has a part-time job that she's doing in addition to her work as a mom, then that's going to be pretty intense. And so, yeah, you'll need some extra time available so that she can go to her job. And I want to encourage you, as I said, just not to just work for work's sake. But I do want to push back, because as you accumulate more and more money, even if you don't have a use for it today, your standard decision should be to accumulate more money, because money is power. Money is influence. It allows you to do things that you otherwise couldn't do. So if you are able to accumulate more money today, and if that means that 30 years from now, there's going to be an extra $1 million under your stewardship, or an extra $2 million, or an extra $20 million under your stewardship, that is going to be very important to your life 30 years from now. So that's a good use of time. Now, if you find something that is a better use of your time today than accumulating that money 20 years from now, then go ahead and do it, right? If there's other work and it may not pay you anything, and you go and do that other work, you should do that. You're responsible to God for how you use the time that He has given to you and how you steward it. But don't just walk away from money just because you can. Recognize that this is a tool that can be deployed with great usefulness. And I'm laboring on this. I'm trying to figure out myself how to articulate this effectively for myself and for others. But I believe that this is frequently poorly articulated, because usually in our society, we see money as primarily for me. We see that money is primarily something that I'm getting for my own benefit and for my own pleasure. And that, so we see that, okay, I'm getting rich so that I can have fancier things. So then we put the retirement lens on it, and we say, I'm getting rich so that I don't have to work anymore. I'm getting rich so that I can have more time off. And then we put the early retirement lens on it, and we say, well, I'm not spending much money. I'm getting rich now so that I can retire super early and I can go and do something I actually want to do with my life. We never stop and think and make a list of the ways that we can use money to make a bigger difference in the world, to change the world, to make a big impact in the world. And one example I would give you, I'm very, very interested over the past couple of years, but especially the last year, in Christian missions. You mentioned working at your local church, Christian missions. And here is a piece of data. I've mentioned this on the show a few weeks ago, but there's an organization called the Lausanne Movement that was originally started with a meeting in Lausanne, Switzerland. So it's named for where the original meeting was. And Lausanne Movement just had their 4th global conference since they were founded in the 1970s. And it was in Korea. I happened to be in Korea at the same time. I wasn't there for the conference, but I went to the conference briefly while I was in Korea a couple of months ago. And during my time, Lausanne Movement, they published a 500-page comprehensive report on the state of basically the global Christian church. And there are two bits of data in that report that, for me, are hugely important. I'll just tell you about one of them. One of the biggest bits of data is financial giving. And there's a chart in that report that shows the amount of money that Christians control on a global basis, all around the world, the amount of money that Christians control. Then the chart shows how much of that money is donated to things that are specifically identified as Christian causes. So how much do people give to their church, to parachurch organizations, things like that. Then they zoom in on the amount of money that is given to Christian missions, as well as the amount of money that is spent on ecclesiastical crime, church crime, fraud, embezzlement, things like that. I am so ashamed to report and to acknowledge that on a global basis, from the best data and estimates that we have, Christians are currently spending more money on crime than we are on foreign missions. The Christian church globally is spending more money on ecclesiastical crime, on fraud, on embezzlement, on lawsuits, etc., than we are on foreign missions. The shame of that statistic I find to be almost overwhelming. And I think that every Christian in the world, you included, and me included, we should be so ashamed of that. And we should stop and we should look at it and say, what on earth are we doing? There's 3.5 billion people in the world today who have no access whatsoever to the Christian gospel. They call it the unreached peoples of the world. So you can divide basically the world's 8.5 billion people into the reached peoples of the world and the unreached peoples of the world. What does that mean? Well, if Jesus Christ comes to somebody in a dream and the guy in the middle of the night, Jesus appears to him and says, I am Jesus, follow me. And the guy wakes up in the morning, the reached people in the world would have an idea of what to do about that. They say, well, there's this guy Jesus that came and showed up to me in a dream. And they know that, hey, there's a church down on the corner. I could go to the bookstore and I could buy a Bible. I could call up my buddy Joe from work, who I think he's a Christian, and he could tell me about Jesus. But in the world today, there's 3.5 billion people who, if they had a sovereignly miraculous dream and Jesus Christ himself appeared to them in the middle of the night and said, I am Jesus Christ, come and follow me, and they woke up the next day, they wouldn't have a clue where to start or what to do. There are no Christian churches around. There are no missionaries. They don't know a Christian. There's no Bible. There's no Christian bookstore. They've got nothing, no place to start. And yet in the Christian world, the amount of money that we're spending on that and the number of people that we're spending doing that or spending on that is absolutely shameful. I'll give you the other figure. I didn't mean to go into this rant, but since my other caller dropped off, I'll just finish it off. I said there's two figures that really are crazy to me. So the first figure is that we're spending more on crime and fraud than we are on foreign missions. The second figure is where our missionaries are going. So if you divide the world into the reached people groups and the unreached people groups, what you see is that 85% of Christian missionaries, foreign missionaries, 85% of foreign Christian missionaries are going to the reached people groups. to the places where there's lots and lots of availability of Christians and gospel materials and things like that. We're sending missionaries from the United States to Mexico, to Paraguay, to Italy, to Nigeria. These are places with millions and millions of Christians. There's churches all around. There's tons of people living there who are available. So if anybody wants to follow Jesus, they can go and do that. Meanwhile, we send only 15% of total missionaries in the world to the unreached people groups. We send 15% of our people to that 3.5 billion people in the world that have no access to the gospel. And these numbers are just completely out of whack. I didn't know about them a couple years ago. I understand that they're widely known in missionary circles, but I didn't know about them. And I'm ashamed of that. And so when I hear someone like you talk the way that you're talking, the first thing I think of is, well, how are you sure we don't need this money? Are you sure you can't do something with this money? Now, if you've got uses for your time, then absolutely. But if you've got an extra $2,000 a month or $3,000 a month, what you can do is go and get, an extra 5 guys together, and you start a team of 5 missionaries that you guys support entirely. And there's so much stuff that can be done, or anything else that you believe is important and effective and useful for you to do. I'm not just putting that on. I'm just using it as an example because I've spent a lot of time trying to understand the lay of the land. So you may be at a point in your life in which your moving to Algeria is not very smart. But you can absolutely send a missionary to Algeria yourself, and you may work an extra 15 or 20 hours a week on top of what you're working right now in order to actually make a difference there. And what I would observe is that as men, we've gotten our priorities so mixed up, and we're such pansies compared to how we used to be. My grandfather, when he was in his working at young adulthood, he worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week at a job, because that was the standard work week. Standard work week was 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. He had a wife, he had children. Life worked. Now, you and I come along and we say, well, 40 hours a week is all we can handle. And then we say, well, 40 hours is not so much. I need more time. And so we wind up just being unproductive and not actually making a difference and not using our time, our talents, our treasure, our ability and our capacity to actually do something. And it's largely because, at least for me, and I'm not preaching at you now, I'm preaching at me. It's largely because we've gotten so obsessed with the idea of personal comfort. That's all about me and what's best for me and me. And we've just stopped being a people who goes out and says what needs to be done, what needs to be conquered, what needs to be built, what needs to be created. And we use kind of our basically personal indulgence as our primary metric. So not mad at you, just observing that for me as a man, I wasted so many years just thinking about how I could have an easier life. And because of that, what do I have? Well, an easier life. But as I get older, I don't want an easier life. I want a more impactful life. And I'm not trying to go too far in any direction or be a workaholic or be bigger than my britches and think that somehow I'm going to change the world. But I want my life to matter. And in order for it to matter, I'm probably going to need to do some work. And I can do work that's effective. And even if all I'm doing is earning money and using it and spending that money on things that I believe are important, that's a good use of time. That's a productive use of time. That's an honorable thing to do. It's also honorable to stop earning money and help your wife, care for your children. Those are all honorable. All of us have to make our own decisions. I'm not going to criticize you at all. But I do think we often make these decisions without recognizing the value of the alternatives. So sermon over, but that's what I've been thinking about recently, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's all good. It's a weird contradiction, right? Because at the end of the day, the most important thing in the world to you is your family, right? So you feel like you should be maximizing time, but at the same time, it's a big world, right? And there's a lot of problems that we can fix, like you said, with money or impact or whatever, or time. And so it's a weird balance. But it's funny too that you decided to go into that rant. Our church is right now in the middle of a campaign for both people with, money and time, right? That they're just looking for more help in all ways. And so my wife and I have been talking about that too. And of course it's a good, would be a good way to spend both of those resources. But, it is, I don't know. I guess I do find it somewhat difficult to balance making sure that I'm maximizing myself and giving the best of myself to my family, but realizing, we are capable of a lot of things, including giving our best to our family and also making an impact on the bigger world.
Yeah. And that's where I don't have a great solution. It's probably going to be different for each person in terms of how much time, but I've wrestled with this question a lot. Like what is the ideal amount of time for me to quote unquote spend with my family? What is that number? Is it 168 hours a week? That's one number. Is it 50 hours a week? Is it 10 hours a week? And why? Like, why would I choose any number? I don't have a perfect answer for that. I spend close to 168 hours a week in the same vicinity as my family. I go in my office and I work, but I'm as close to about 168 hours a week as it's possible for somebody who's not financially independent to be able to do, I think. But then I look at that and say, is this actually a good use of the time? Just sitting here in the same room together doesn't seem like it's the thing. So that's where I go back to what's the activity? What are we actually doing and why? And so it's not just the number of hours. It's what am I doing with those hours? And that's where we can use the time very intentionally and purposefully, and we can waste the time just being in the same room. I don't think that your relationship with your children is going to be, I don't think that if you spend 2 hours a day sitting on the couch watching TV next to your children 5 days a week for the next 5 years, that's somehow a magically good thing of time. Maybe it is. Maybe you have a little bit more connection, but I think you could be intentional about it. So I think time is good. I still believe, Brian Tracy used to say that it's quantity of time at home that counts and quality of time at work. I think that makes sense. I believe that is true. But as I look at it, just say that we should be purposeful with it. So more time, yes, but more time for what? Let's say the for what, and then make sure we have the appropriate amount of time for those activities and that way to use the time, and then prioritize that. But if we don't have the for what, then let's be thoughtful and not just automatically assume that me just hanging out on the couch is automatically going to lead to a more impactful life. Because I think that can often cause a man to under fulfill his potential. All right, Ben, may God give you wisdom as you consider these things, wisdom to you and to your wife as you consider what is appropriate for you. Thank you for calling in.
Yep. Thanks very much.
And with that, we conclude our Friday Q&A show. I apologize to the other caller that hung on all the way through. He was last to call in and the last to leave. If you would like to gain access to one of these Friday Q&A shows, remember, you can do that by going to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance, patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance. And remember also, rpfacademy.com. If you would like to work with me throughout the entirety of this next year, building a robust, comprehensive financial plan, financial freedom plan for you and your family, do that at rpfacademy.com.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.